You got great sound. I hope I sound as good. Okay.
Okay, here we go. Excellent. All right, everybody, welcome, 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 welcome. This is great. We're doing our, what is this, our fifth? I can't remember. This is our fifth campfire chat. We're so lucky today to have the one, the only Eli Schwartz with us, the author of an amazing book. If you haven't read it yet, it's called Product Led SEO. I was lucky enough to meet you, Eli, at San Diego for Brighton SEO,
At
and
your party.
I was pretty mesmerized actually. Nick told me you were going to show up. You were flying in for the party, and I was like, oh my god! I finally get to meet Eli."
Thank you.
And since then, I've read your book and I've read a bunch of your articles, and I've just taken a ton of notes. Uh, can you give us a little bit of background? Can you tell us a little bit about your career arc? And I just want folks to get to know you because you're one of the most important thought leaders in our industry.
I really appreciate it. It's great to be here. I'm honored to meet you. I was on when I don't even know if you still do it, but the clubhouses, and you were like the guy putting together all the good clubhouses, and I was like, I don't want to miss Noah's stuff, and you had your dashboards and the stuff you were sharing. I'm like, this guy is a genius. So I was equally honored to meet you in Brighton, and a really great to be here. So my career, I've had done a lot of interesting stuff, but I want to say that most of it is luck, like right place,
Hmm.
right time kind of stuff. My very very first job, I worked at a company called Quinn Street. I did not do SEO. I didn't know anything about digital marketing. I worked with affiliates, and
Hmm.
I worked with these affiliates, and they did SEO, and it was fascinating to me. And I taught myself SEO from them, and I really wanted to get a job in SEO, but I couldn't because I didn't have any SEO credibility except for messing around on websites. And then I applied for this job, and the CEO of the startup decided that the company I was working for, Quinn Street, and they're still around, they own a bunch of insurance sites, is the best SEO company in the world. And or they were best at SEO, and he decided he only wanted to hire someone from Quinn Street. So even though I didn't do SEO, I got hired for a role I didn't know anything about because the company I worked at was thought to be good at SEO.
Hmm.
So then I went there. I don't have any of the educational pedigree to ever get into the really good companies. And then I was at this startup, and I wanted to get into a really good company, but I couldn't because I hadn't gone to all the really good schools that people like to hire from when they hire from in Silicon Valley. And I applied for this job at SurveyMonkey, and the recruiter that was like hiring for a role in SEO at SurveyMonkey was the exact same recruiter who had hired me at my first job at Quinn Street.
Hmm.
So again, total luck. And then I was very fortunate working at a big brand. I got to do cool SEO stuff, and we'll dive into like the alliances and the technicals and the tacticals that I did there. And then what really kicked off my consulting was a colleague I had at SurveyMonkey was a part-time partner at Y Combinator, which is, the
Oh,
accelerator
wow. Yeah,
that,
yeah.
kicked off Reddit and all that. And we worked together, and he had past experience with SEO, and he thought everyone in SEO was a scam artist and
Hmm.
a snake oil salesperson. And somehow I impressed upon him that I wasn't. And then he said, well, you obviously know what you're doing with SEO stuff. And he introduced me to all the YC companies. So if you like look at my LinkedIn, I did some work with Quora. That was a YC company. And so much of what I've done have come through YC. I was on the YC podcast before I even know what it was. It was the exact same podcast that Elon Musk was on. I didn't get as many views as he did, but that drove even more brand consulting. And for anyone, listening, watching, brands lead to other brands in general. Like if you work at Google, someone's like, oh, you're a genius, I want to hire you at my startup. Maybe true, maybe not, but like my ability to like my luck really in consulting for some of these really cool logos has led to other really cool logos. And like I said, a lot of it right place, right time. And then I did learn a ton. Obviously, I went, worked with these great companies and saw great stuff. But I feel like the real start was being right place, right time.
Wild. Okay. So I've read a bunch about your time at SurveyMonkey, and I think it's in your, right at the beginning, you dedicate the book to the founder of SurveyMonkey. He had a huge impact on you, right?
Yeah, so he wasn't the founder. So SurveyMonkey had
Oh,
an interesting story arc. They were a 12-person company, and they were a cash cow. And then in 2009, Dave Goldberg, who passed away and I dedicated my book to, he bought SurveyMonkey and turned it
Uh,
into what it became.
okay.
So that was in 2009. They were founded in 1999. So it was a small company, and then they turned it into a powerhouse. The reason I dedicated my book to him, and this, I don't want to take up too much time, so I'm going to give the very, very quick version of this. And I've written about it. It's in my newsletter. It's like one of my first newsletter posts. But essentially, I wanted to get international experience. I wanted to live overseas. I got a job. I was going to leave SurveyMonkey. I got a job in Singapore, leading an SEO team for an agency. And when I went to give notice, Dave Goldberg, who was a CEO who I didn't have very much to do with, but cross paths. It was a small enough company, insisted that I not leave SurveyMonkey, and he allowed me to write my own job description, write my own salary, and he sent
Wow.
me to Singapore, reporting directly to him. So the reason I dedicated my book to him is because like that was my experience with entrepreneurship, experience with someone like taking a big bet on me, and I feel like a lot of what my career became was because he took that bet on me. So that's why I dedicated the book to him. But that is a very, very short version of an amazing story. So please check out the longer version on my newsletter, which is basically my blog.
Which is amazing. Uh, it got me wondering. So there's a couple things that I loved about your onboarding process. So I signed up for your newsletter, and you're like, "Oh yeah, by the way, you should also sign up for. We'll automatically sign you up for Lenny's, and we'll automatically sign
Oh,
you
I
up
didn't
for
know it does
Growth."
that. That's cool.
Oh yeah, and it does Growth Memo, and then there's two or three others. But I was like, "Ooh, that's sticky. I like that a lot because it's like cross suggesting."
Totally.
Um, yeah, that's super wild. So tell me about what it was like to build the team inside SurveyMonkey. And w- like, I want to hear about your failures.
Oh, I failed a ton. I mean, for anybody that didn't read my book, if you read my book, this is going to be repetitive. But if you didn't read my book, it's a great story. So I joined SurveyMonkey. I came from a startup. The startup I was at before, I wrote about it in my book. We got hit by Panda. It was a traumatic startup. Like I thought the company would go under. We survived Panda. We rescued the sites from Panda. And then I joined SurveyMonkey, was my first like real big company, coming from a 20-person startup where like I sat in the same room as anybody, as everyone else, and then going over to a real company. It was tough. And I'm there. It's my very first week. And I did what anybody in SEO would do. You audit the site, look for some problems, find a quick win, which, if anyone's new at SEO, do that. Find a quick win, just earn some political capital. So I found some quick wins. I forgot exactly what it was, but something around redirects and iframes or something. And I was like, this is an easy one. We're going to like redirect some stuff and we're going to get great internal links and we're going to get more traffic. This is great. So I went in, I told my boss, and he's like, okay, go talk to this engineer. And I went over to this engineer and I was like, this is it. Like an engineer, I'd never had a problem with engineers listening to me before. You tell them to fix stuff and they fix stuff. Told this guy what I needed. Didn't even know how to write a ticket. Brand new with this company. Is my first week. He turns his back on me and he says marketing doesn't get to tell engineering what to do. And he just sat there, went back to his work, and he just completely ignored me. And I was like, wow, get this brand new job. I'm so excited. I just burned my bridges with this startup. I'm gonna get fired. I'm gonna get fired in my very first week because the one layup I found, no one's gonna do because marketing doesn't get to tell engineering what to do. I was like, I can't go back to my boss. I can't cry to my manager and say I can't get my job done. They just hired me to do this. So that is when I decided I had to start building soft skills around diplomacy and earning political capital. And I forget the precise things I did, but that engineer did end up doing what I wanted. And he never forgot that he said that. I mean, like I was there for, I think with him for another 5 years. When he left, he remembered, and like, we became friends, and that was great. And I'm glad he said that to me. But that would have been a massive failure. And I learned so much throughout my time there in being able to get others to do stuff when they don't care, right? Like at a bigger company, I have my SEO goals. They have engineering goals. They don't win from my SEO goals. I have my SEO goals. The content team has their goals. They don't win from my goals. So it's really about how to get goals to align. So someone wants to do something that they don't get paid for, they don't get a bonus for. So like that becomes so much more important. And now as a consultant, I have my goals. I'm getting paid. And if I don't get other people who don't work for me to do stuff, my contract gets terminated. And that's where I learned that. But one really, really big failure, and I don't know if I talked about this in the book. It's been a while since I wrote the book, so apologize to everyone. I should read my own book again.
Yeah.
But I was at I was at SurveyMonkey, and I was responsible for international stuff. And I came up with this idea that we would do better internationally if we would have TLDs. So, for anybody not deep in SEO, TLD, top level domain, .co.uk versus .com. So we had surveymonkey.com. I came with this idea that we should have surveymonkey.co.uk and surveymonkey.de. Now, we happened to have been, this isn't a story I told many times, but it's a cool one. We happened to have been Capital G, which is Google's private equity arm. We happened to have been their very, very first investment. So Google invested into SurveyMonkey. They invested $50 million into SurveyMonkey as a private equity, not as a VC. So for anyone, check it out. They have Capital G is their own website. They invested into competitive companies, even to Google. So they've invested into like Lyft, which competes with Waymo, invested in Augusto. So we were their very first investment. So the CEO, Dave Goldberg, decided that if we were their investment, we were entitled to advice and support from them. So at this point, I'd been doing SEO for a really long time. I didn't think that to be true.
Yeah.
However, he insisted. He said, you need to email Google and tell them they own us, and we need advice on how to do this TLD thing.
Wow.
So again, I didn't know how to say no to him. So I wrote the email and he sent it. And they routed it from our investment manager at Capital G, and it made it over to Matt Cutts. Again, for anyone newer at SEO, go Google that. Matt Cutts was the guy at Google, the SEO gatekeeper. So it made its way to Matt Cutts, and Matt Cutts blew it off. So it came back to me through the CEO, and I read the blow off email. It was like we don't tell people what to do. And Dave Goldberg's like, well, that's not an acceptable answer. They own us and they need to tell us what to do. You need to write the response and I will send it back through these channels and it'll go back to this guy. I don't know who this Matt guy is, but he needs to give us an answer because they own us. So we went back and forth, and Matt eventually did actually give the answer. And the answer was something around brand authority. It would be helpful from a user standpoint and blah, blah, blah. But reading between the lines, he said, build these TLDs.
Hmm.
So we went to go build the TLDs, but it took us 3 years to actually do it. We got
Wow.
data centers. The GDPR wasn't in effect yet, but there were other privacy laws, and we really spent a lot of money on it. And by the time we launched it, everything had changed. And my role had changed completely too. So at this point, I'm now doing international marketing, not just SEO. And as a part of this role, I went to the UK and I went to Germany and I met with some SurveyMonkey customers. And one of the things I asked them during my customer interviews is like, how much does it matter to you that we are now surveymonkey.co.uk and surveymonkey.de? Every single person I met said, is this something you're planning to do? I said, no, it's been live for a year. They're like, oh, sorry, I haven't noticed. So we built this entire thing, spent millions of dollars, and it didn't do anything whatsoever. So to me, that big failure was like not my money, which is great. It wasn't my money, not barely even my time as engineering time. It was a massive project. Like every quarter, the engineers had to update how they're doing this thing. It's actually for anybody in engineering, and I think you understand this a lot. It's very complex because you had to carry over the cookies. So if you log into surveymonkey.com and it brings you over to surveymonkey.co.uk, it's got to bring your login, bring all your information. You have to protect it behind these walls because if someone logs into the wrong website, they need to be able to see their surveys or they think something's broken. So it's pretty complex. So it's
They could
very
do a man
expensive.
in the middle attack on
Oh
that
my God.
potentially.
It was
Yeah.
very complex.
Yeah.
So that was massive to me. And that really had me shift my thinking around. We should have done that piece first. Should have gone to the British users and said, hey, does it matter to you? Like, do you care? Because that was like a slight Google thing. And it didn't even matter for SEO either.
So that gets me to a question. I've got a whole bunch of questions on this, but like the first is when I think of you, I think of focus on the user, stupid. So can you walk us through that mental framework a little bit?
Yes. So I'm actually working on a new book. So I have a book deal with Wiley on this concept. It's not for SEO, it's just understanding users. So I've been consulting full time for 6 years. Almost every single conversation I have with a prospective client or just casually for networking, I find that most founders and many times marketers don't know what their user looks like. They usually think their user looks like them. So their user has their problems and would do things the way they would do things. And they rarely sit in the user's seat and try to understand the user's very specific pain and how the users would do things. So I find that's general, right? The only people that are really, really good at this are some empathetic marketers, but founders very rarely are good at this. And product people, engineers, like when I was at SurveyMonkey, engineers rarely even logged into the website. So like they were building stuff and they didn't have any user empathy whatsoever. And I learned this user empathy concept by doing what I just mentioned, like meeting with actual users, seeing their surveys, asking them why they ran surveys. And to me, it was fascinating. I learned things I never would have learned unless I asked them that. So that when I say understanding users and focusing on users, I mean that. It's not like, oh, I'm going to find the keyword the user would search, and therefore I'm going to build my SEO around this hypothetical keyword that I think the user wants. When I'm building SEO, I really want to get into the mindset of the user. What are they looking for? What are they trying to solve? So in today's paradigm of SEO, they're forced, or today's paradigm of search, really, they're forced to conceptualize what they're looking for in a few words that they type into a search engine. In 2 years from now, it might be something they speak in a whatever, ChatGPT. That's still search. That's still SEO, but it's really understanding what the user is trying to solve and why the user is trying to solve it. And I'll go back to the startup, and it's something I didn't understand when I was doing it. So I was working at this automotive content startup. We were competing with Edmunds and Yahoo.com, and our most popular keywords were photos, things related to photos. And I didn't get it. I'm like, why does someone want to look at Honda, Odyssey photos? Why does someone want to look at Honda Odyssey 360 photos, right? So I was optimizing for these terms. We got a lot of traffic. Only when I had kids and when I was buying a minivan did I get it. I spend all this time like looking at photos, like, okay, how does the car seat fit in the car? Does a bike go in the back seat? Can I, how many suitcases can I throw in there? So that becomes user empathy. So photos is the way that someone conceptualizes their own thinking behind that purchase. But really, if you get at the intent, those become so many more keywords. It becomes minivan that fits a bike. It becomes minivan that fits a ski rack. And those become so many more keywords. And again, it's keywords, but it's intent, it's concepts behind what the user is looking to solve. And I think you can do so much better SEO if you understand the user and what the user is trying to do with whatever it is they're doing online, and you build SEO for that. And that's where you get into what I didn't invent whatsoever, but is blue oceans, a place where
Oh,
no
I
one
love
is
that
really
book.
competing, where people are, again, you're solving a problem that should be solved, but no one thought about it. In SEO, there are so many blue oceans. Again, the photos is a great example because everyone's like, oh, wow, went into Ahrefs, I went into SEMrush, went to Google Keyword Planner. Honda Odyssey photos is a very popular keyword, but it doesn't tell you the intent behind the photos. If you understand the intent behind the photos, you open up this blue ocean of why does someone care what a Honda Odyssey looks like that they need to see a picture? Massive blue ocean.
Hmm. I love that. Are you a proponent of the jobs to be done framework?
Somewhat.
Somewhat. That's cool. Um, I love that. Let's go back to SaaS and working inside both SaaS and startups. You've been lucky enough to work with a whole bunch of big brands. I think we SEOs tend to get into specific niches. I don't think a lot of folks have exposure to this. What's unique about working with SaaS and startup companies that have been through a couple rounds of funding, I guess?
The more funding they get, the more complex the company gets, and
Mm.
the harder it is to actually get anything done. And I'll use SurveyMonkey as an example. When I joined SurveyMonkey, there were just over 100 people, which is why I had that relationship with the CEO. When I left, there were close to 3,000 people. But
Oof.
if you look at the revenue, it did not scale proportionally to the employee size. So,
Mm.
and what happens is, and I find this is very, very common, where companies scale, they get a lot more employees, and that creates more complexities. And all those employees are working 40-hour weeks, 50-hour weeks, which means they're doing a lot of work. And that creates different roadblocks, different things to navigate. There, when I've consulted for large companies, I discovered that everyone wants to, I don't want to degrade all of them, but like they want to feel like they're doing a job, that their job, that they throw up a roadblock because they want to feel important. So
Hmm.
there was a large company I was consulting for. I had to run a title tag by the legal team, by the marketing team, by the PR team, by the brand team, and then international country managers in 5 different countries. And only then did they approve 4 words in a title tag. And obviously it took many, many months for that to happen. And we got a lot of traffic from that title tag. The title tag before was awful. So if you can imagine, if it took that much effort to get a title tag approved, imagine how much more effort it is to get, like, I don't know, I was trying to help them change a CMS
Yeah, or
even more.
new page template or anything.
Everything, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's what I found. As companies get bigger, you have more of those people, and no one's going to say, my job is really unnecessary here. Just do what you got to do. No, they need a meeting. They need an hour meeting too, and
Mm.
you have to get through that.
I'm a huge proponent of thinking differently about the work we do. And I've really enjoyed talking to a whole bunch of guests that for some reason or another I'm aligning with. And it's focus on business goals and not things like rankings. So we'll get to that as a bigger topic, but I want to know what's unique or different about aligning to SaaS tool business goals. Like, what kind of specific challenges have you found with that?
Yeah, no, that was a very early consulting experience for me. So one of my very first consulting projects, I worked with Mixpanel. And I don't know how Mixpanel is doing right now. This is 6 years ago, and Mixpanel only had a couple competitors. So they were competing with Google Analytics, and they're competing with Adobe. I don't know if Amplitude was really around, but like they only had a couple competitors, and Mixpanel was very expensive. And for anybody not familiar, it's an analytics tool, which means that it's baked in, like very, very much baked into the product. And it was a product analytics tool, which meant that you baked it into your app too. So it's not the kind of thing that a product manager or a marketer is going to be Googling and be like, oh, wow, Mixpanel solves all my problems. I'm making meetings right now and I'm meeting engineers and tomorrow it's launching. And it was expensive. So I was working with Mixpanel, built out all SEO by the book. The way we should do SEO, we wrote all the content, we built out all the pages, and nothing happened.
Mm.
Like it did not impact the business. And then I said to the mix, I met with the mix panel team, and I said, "Don't we have a tool that could look at this?" Obviously, mix panel is that tool. And what we discovered is that it took so many months for anyone to buy mix panel because it's so baked into the process. It's so expensive. Maybe SEO mattered, maybe it didn't. But by the time you bought, it didn't matter. And so many other things had to happen. And I'd say that's the challenge with SaaS in general. The goal of SaaS, if you're in e-commerce, you're going to buy within the next 30 minutes or not. Maybe you'll never buy, and that's where retargeting comes in. But you're not going to buy in a year from now. And with SaaS, it becomes like that. So it means you have to have earlier KPIs to show that the SEO is working. And in many cases, many of the prospective companies I talk to that are looking for SEO consulting, I tell them not to bother with SEO at all because it's so narrow. The SEO is so narrow. They're better off just taking that money and putting into those other channels, whether it's like more trade show booths or more paid marketing or even a billboard, because it will drive more of what they're looking for. Whereas SEO, they could, and like, I don't mean not to do SEO at all. Maybe they just do brand SEO, but even for Mixpanel, like, yes, Mixpanel does analytics, but they don't need 80 different pieces of content on what analytics are to actually drive a lead. And with a really long sales process, it's check out the website, maybe read enough content that you're willing to give your contact info. Then a salesperson's going to do a demo. Then another salesperson's going to, harass you and try to get you further down that funnel. Then maybe they'll show up at your office. Like those are all things that, yeah, sort of SEO mattered. But even without SEO, would you have made that purchase ever? So probably you would have. And that's
My
and that's the SaaS challenge.
I love that. My favorite invite when I was getting courted by Snowflake's analytics tool. I forget what it's called, but they're like, "Oh, we're gonna be in Denver. We want to like throw axes with you." I was like, yeah, I'm good. I don't need to toss axes.
Th-
Um,
That's pretty funny. Actually, I had an interview experience like that during COVID. I interviewed at Google
yeah.
to do SEO for Google Cloud. And I went through the interview process. I didn't really think I'd take the job, but I thought it'd be kind of interesting anyways, because they'd reached out. It's not like I had to go anywhere for an interview. And I kept pushing on. So like, because I didn't care if I got the offer or not, I was, more open to like asking lots of questions. So each of the interviewers, I had 6 interviewers, started with like, do you have any questions for me? And then I took the next 30 minutes to ask all my questions, which were like, why do you want to do SEO? What kind of keywords do you focus on? And to me, it was baffling because it was the Google Cloud product, which only has 2 competitors, Amazon and Microsoft. And I doubted that any CIO, that they were going after the big companies, any CIO who's making a Google Cloud purchase is not going to take a pitch from Amazon or Microsoft. So yeah, and also I thought it was funny they were like really focused on Google rankings. So like we want to rank like number 1 for like cloud tool. And I'm like, is there someone you can call to like make that happen? So I asked all those questions and tried to understand more about their firewalls and all that. But to me, it's baffling. Like when you really think about it, like should they be spending that much money on SEO? For Google, yes. I mean, I think that business makes $1 billion. So what difference does it make if they spend, some rounding error on SEO? But for other businesses, if it's meaningful to them, there might be better channels.
Hmm. Uh, Eric Wu has been one of my mentors in terms of like learning how to think critically about things. And the first time he told me that about SaaS and startup companies who need to get traction fast, that yeah, SEO is in the right channel, they need to do digital PR, that totally blew my mind, when I heard it the first time. Um, what are some of the challenges you face as a consultant integrating with internal teams these days?
It's always been a challenge. Like there's always various challenges, and I'd say now the biggest challenge is that internal teams feel threatened by external consultants
Mm.
because there are more layoffs happening in SEO. There are more layoffs happening in marketing. So that has always been a challenge I faced. I
Oh.
always prefer to work with companies that don't have an internal SEO team because I'm
Mm.
not competing with anyone. It's much easier to get things done when the people have hired you, if it's a product team or a growth team, they're looking for that external expert to tell them what to do. When it's an SEO team, if the SEO team hasn't hired me, they're very focused on making sure I look stupid because I threaten their job. And I understand that. And I try to never make them look stupid. And I want to support them. So they become an advocate so we can work together and we can both accomplish our goals. But
Mm.
when or if the SEO team has hired me, maybe the SEO leader has hired me, but then some other counterpart also doesn't wants to make me look stupid. So has become more of a challenge of late, and I'm very cognizant of why it's like that,
Mm.
and I want to support them. But most of the time, when I meet with a company that has an SEO team, if I think the SEO person is great, try to encourage them to save their money, not hire any consultant because I feel like it's going to fail anyways.
I want to dig into your brain a little bit. One of my favorite questions is to ask people how they think, but I feel like that's too broad for you. So I want to get into strategy. Like, how do you formulate strategy when you're taking on new clients? How do you um, how do you kind of do 0 to 1 to build strategy? Can you take us through a mental framework at all?
Yeah. So it's very, very user focused. All of my onboarding calls are always focused on the pain of the user. Who is this user? What problem are we solving? And trying to dig into what is that user looking for. And then it becomes a lot easier to conceptualize what is that user looking for in search and what would they expect to find when they click on a result, and what would the funnel look like. So there are many ways to capture that user and to steer them in various directions. So I'm working with a client right now in the healthcare space, and there are many ways to solve the pain of their specific user. That user's pain could be solved with medicine. That user's pain can be solved with acupuncture. That user's pain could be solved with, I don't know, hypnosis. The user's pain could be solved with therapy. So when they're Googling, they are open. They could go in any of those directions. They can go in any of those funnels. So as I go higher in the funnel and try to understand what prompts them to do a search, what prompts them to go online to seek help. So therefore, what they're looking for is they're looking for some sort of validation, and only then can you bring them to a funnel. So if a hypnosis page is ranking number one, they now fall into the hypnosis funnel. If an acupuncture page is ranking number one, they could fall into the acupuncture funnel. So moving much higher in the funnel and understanding who this user is and what they're trying to solve, you can meet them exactly where they are and bring them to lower points in the funnel. And I find many SEO strategies are purely focused either at only the top of the funnel or only at the bottom of the funnel. So let's say, and the client is not in the back pain space, but let's say it's back pain. So they're Googling back pain. So you might say, well, this is back pain. These are all the things that you could have back pain from, to top of the funnel. Or if they're Googling, um, I don't know, some sort of specific procedure to solve their back pain, that's all the way at the bottom of the funnel. Not as many people search it. And it may be very competitive, let's say with local providers. So understanding the user as much as possible allows me to build out those strategies of how we could find those users and bring them into a funnel. And then ideally, I love working with clients when there's a programmatic way to do this. So if it's some sort of health condition, there's programmatic ways to address every single health condition. And it's not the spammy way of, well, these are all the parts of the body, so I'm going to build out a page for all the parts of the body. It's really understanding all the various ways this pain manifests and building out, again, understanding each one of these users. And it's not that I'm afraid of duplicate content like this page. Oh, the back pain page is going to be same as like the upper back pain page. Well, if upper back pain and back pain are two different things, that's not duplicative. But if they are the same thing, it does become duplicative. So really looking at the from a user standpoint, it allows me to build out these strategies. So that's the way I always approach it. And then it needs to be validated. So there's, clients I worked with where I built out this entire strategy and did nothing. And the reason why is because maybe it works from a user standpoint, but from a Google standpoint, they don't yet see it as differentiated. And I'll give you, there's another SurveyMonkey example. So when I joined SurveyMonkey, they only had 4 keywords that they ranked number one on or got any sort of traffic from: the word survey, the plural of that, surveys, online survey, and online survey. So those are the only 4 keywords they ranked on. So that was the situation I came into, and I was able to grow that channel. A couple of years after working there, they actually lost the rankings for the word survey and the word surveys. So 2 of our 4 keywords, we moved from position number 1 to position number 8. And the reason why was because Google determined that when someone searched survey or surveys, they were not looking to do what SurveyMonkey offered, which was create a survey. They were looking to do what all those spammy sites online that pay you points to do stuff were doing, which is they were looking to take a survey. So despite the fact that SurveyMonkey had links from every website in the world, including Google and including the White House and including the parliaments of every government in the entire world, we were being outranked by spammy sites that stole information and convinced people to take surveys and paid them in seashells. But that is what Google determined the user wanted. And this was in 2014. We're now 11 years ahead of that. So we're much further from this. So I might come up with a strategy that addresses what the user wants, but Google's data might still say, oh, yeah, we're a couple of years back. And an example of that might be something around AI. There's a lot of AI tools that solve problems that are very niche. And maybe the AI companies have determined that people want what they're doing, but Google says, yeah, there's not enough search volumes. People still want that old solution. I don't know. When people search note taking, they want you know, paper notebooks. And that's what we're going to rank for. That doesn't matter what your research says. So those two things have to align. And that is, you can do that. And that's where blue oceans fit in. But sometimes it's a blue ocean on the user side, but not yet a blue ocean on the Google side. If the research, and if I'm very convinced of it, that this is actually a user pain and the user will be there, it's worth leaving up. It's worth continuing to invest in and waiting for Google to show up.
As you're building this, do you have questions that you lean into over and over again? Like, is there a blue ocean strategy opportunity here that hasn't been addressed yet? I mean, do you have a set of questions that you like to ask yourself?
No, I just always prioritize curiosity, like
Okay.
continuously asking why and what.
Ah, the 5 whys. Okay, cool.
Yes.
So, you've also, I mean, one of the things that I dug about your book was how you get into all the tools that you've built, like not like lead gen things, but you'll advocate for significant investment because you'll think there'll be a big ROI on the back end for it. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so it's a quantitative process of understanding what will happen with something, and I think this is missing in a lot of SEO plans. So an SEO plan usually starts with like this is this much keyword volume, and we're just going to build it because there's some sort of expectation. I like to focus on it from more of a quantitative standpoint of if I understand this user's pain. So let's say I'm dealing with, and there's two aspects to this. One is TAM, which I'll do all of my SEO forecasting off of TAM, which is total addressable market, which I don't think most people approach when they're doing any sort of SEO. So if there's something that is very specific to males and is not prevalent at all with females, I immediately cut whatever population size I think I'm focusing on in half. If there's something that's focused only on 18 to 24, then as I'm doing the forecast, that's the only age that matters for any upside. So it doesn't matter. So search volume doesn't really matter. It really comes down to that. So I was working with this company. They were looking to expand into a women's clothing in Germany, and they wanted to understand how much search volume they could expect. So they did the bottoms up. They did like coats and dresses, and they looked at the search volume, and it wasn't meaningful. So I looked at it from another way, which was what was the population of Germany? How many females are there in Germany? How many females there are in Germany that fit the age group they were looking to target? So you could have the total number of females, but some of them might be too old and some of them might be too young. So then looking at that age group, and then we cut it a few more times, but the most important thing that we looked at, which was how many of those people in that slice of that cohort we looked at were going to shop online. So it didn't matter whatsoever if like, it's a jacket and all, people in Germany that are female buy jackets every year. Doesn't matter. If 95% of people in Germany that buy jackets buy them in a physical store, then that was it. That was the only we could only capture 5%. So from a quantitative standpoint, that's what I focus on. So if I'm doing an ROI analysis, I first do the TAM, understand which users I'm targeting. And then the second thing I do, which I don't know that enough people in SEO have done this, but if you're an SEO and you've never done any paid marketing, do it for a little bit. Learn a little bit of paid marketing because it will help you in SEO a lot, which is focus on all of your SEO analysis as if you're doing paid and use paid numbers like CAC, cost of acquisition, or LTV. So that's where I think SEO wins when you focus on CAC and LTV. So when it comes to CAC for paid, if you convert 1 out of 100, let's say it's Google Ads, you need to get 100 clicks on Google Ads before you convert one person. And then as soon as you convert that one person, you move into the next cohort, which is you need 100 clicks on Google Ads. Where SEO becomes so much better is you do your SEO stuff and your CAC actually continues to decline as long as your SEO is effective. Your page is up. So every time you get an acquisition, your total CAC, your total cost divided by all the customers you've acquired continues to improve. And then there's LTV, which might be fuzzy for paid marketing. We're like, well, this cohort will stick around for 2 years, this one will stick around for 5 years, this one will stick around for 1 month. Your LTV on SEO is all marginal. So if you've acquired users and then you continue to acquire users and they stick around forever, your profit on SEO continues to grow and grow and grow. So if anybody spend time in paid marketing, they know that's how you look at paid marketing, return on ad spend, ROAS. Do the same thing for SEO. So those are the things I like to approach from an SEO standpoint. And the last thing I've done for SEO is build out these spreadsheets where I use the Rice format. I think it came from Sean. Some of it came from Sean Ellis. They wrote growth hacking. So Rice is reach, impact, confidence, and effort. So just to break down these things, and I'll go back to something we talked about earlier, this building out the TLDs in the UK. So reach, if I'm building out the TLDs in the UK, I'm reaching only people in the UK. It only matters to people in the UK. So if I'm trying to decide whether I should do something for the UK or Canada, the UK has more people, I think, than Canada. So my reach
Yeah,
might be higher.
a lot
So I'll
more.
score it like that. Then impact. So this is a guess, right? How much will this effort that we're doing, how much will it impact the people in the UK? I'm guessing. So score it between 1 and 100 or 1 and 10, just a guess. Confidence, that decides how confident I am in the impact of what I'm doing. So I might be like, well, Matt Cutts said to do it, so my confidence is 10. I got it straight from the top, or I'm making this up. It's just some SEO theory, so my confidence might be 1. And the last is effort. So this is where working with engineers, you understand I'm changing a title tag. They could do it in 3 seconds. So the effort is very, very low. Or I'm building out an entire new CMS, or I'm launching a TLD that took 3 years to launch. So the effort is very, very high. So adding all this together, you can do it higher or low, however it is. When you do this scoring, it shows you what you should focus on. So I found, and this has been my own experience, a lot of times SEO is all about the first thing. Oh, this title tag's broken. It's very important we do it right now. There's a 404 page. We must fix this right now. But if you take all the potential things, whether it's building a new product, launching a new page, launching a new language, or just fixing 404s, lay this down on a spreadsheet and then score it and say, well, we could fix the 404 pages. It's good. It's meaningful, but it won't add anything to the bottom line. So if I go and I expend political capital on having them do this and it doesn't move the needle, they may be less likely to do that other thing that moves the needle. So when I start a new engagement, it's all about really scoring out these things, doing the things that are easy and impactful to earn more credibility to do the next things that are slightly harder and slightly more impactful in leading up to it. If you do it the wrong way and say, well, this is the big thing we're doing, and this is where I see a lot of SEO audits are like, you got to fix page speed. We need to make the page so much faster. And then you do it. And they're like, did it work? You're like, well, we're green. It probably worked. They're like, did we make more money? Like, well, I'm not really sure. So now they don't want to do that next thing. One of the
You
companies I
just
saw
stole
this.
my joke, by the way. I was about to ask
Oh
how
no,
important
I
page
got
speed
even
is.
better one. When
Yeah.
I consulted for Mixpanel, so one of the things I get, so I'm not an agency, I'm a consultant, I'm an advisor. So I join a company, and then sometimes I get an email address, sometimes I get added to Slack, but I always get added to the Google Drive because I'm part of the team. And one of the things they always send me, they're like, here's the SEO Google Drive. They always have the other agencies' proposals, so I could see if I priced right. So Mixpanel, there's an agency, one of the massive agencies, had given them a proposal that was 200 pages, and they had 50 pages on page speed and how much Mixpanel's page speed sucked. Unfortunately for me, they were priced many, many times higher than me, and I won and I beat them because I was priced too low. So that was my mistake, and I learned from that. But they were all about focused on page speed. Now, keeping in mind what Mixpanel does, they have a script that runs on every single page of one of their clients. Page speed is so important to them as a business. I'm pretty sure that they've optimized the hell out of it. And what they would have had to do when they were debating this other proposal and fixing page speed, they're like, we think we have to get another data center. It's going to cost us $2 million. Do you think that's a good idea? And I'm like, I don't think you're going to get $2 million back in your investment. Maybe you'll get $2 million if you lower churn because people are pissed about your script loading, but you're not going to get it back from SEO. So that was one of those things. So I see that often. If you use this rice format and evaluate things like getting another data center for $2 million, that should fall to the bottom of the pile.
Yeah, I love that. What else do most SEOs get wrong?
They don't have any confidence. And
Hmm.
this is something that I noticed in COVID. So at the beginning of COVID, you had all these people going on TV and they didn't have any answers. So the reporter would say, so doctor, you're the biggest doctor in the world. Is people going to die if they get COVID? And then they would just like, oh, well, if they have a comorbidity, maybe they'll die, maybe they won't die. So everyone freaked out. So they closed the whole world because they didn't know, are we going to die? Or the whole world going to end? But if someone would have had that level of confidence, be like, yeah, you'll get very sick, you may die, but more than likely, if you're, this age, you're going to be okay. There would have been far less panic. And I suddenly started seeing that in SEO. So I would have all these SEO clients and they would ask me questions. And if I said it depends, they're looking for an answer. So they'll go shop around to find the right answer. But if I can give them a confident, direct answer, I could be wrong. I could caveat my answer with hey, if we launch in the UK, will we double our traffic? I'm like, well, based on what we're analyzing here, there's a strong possibility we'll double our traffic. I think this is a great investment. There is a 5% chance that this happens and 10% chance that that happens. Could either of those happen? Yes. Many times I've been totally wrong. And I can say, look, that was one of the scenarios we looked at. This was the likelihood. It was 5%, it was 10%, and that's what happened. Up front, I don't have to say, well, it depends. So I'm holding myself back from ever being accountable for it. And I find that's one of the things. I know everyone makes fun of like SEO says it depends. I want to go even further from that. People should just be more confident. Like, you know, your stuff. You've seen this before. Just confidently say what you think will happen. Give yourself an out. Like, you actually know what could also happen. So give yourself an out.
But let's dig into this a little bit. So are you just presenting a swag, like a scientific wild ass guess that you're defining in the moment? Like, hey, there's a 10% chance this happens, a 70% chance this happens, and let's see, 100 minus 70 and 10, and there's a 20% chance or are you actually doing a bunch of math behind the scenes
I'm
coming
no,
up
I'm
right
not doing the
before?
real math. The thing is, I most of the time I know what will happen because I've seen it before. So if someone says, should we invest $2 million in a new data center? I can confidently say, no, I don't think you should invest $2 million in a new data center. They're like, how do you know? I'm like, because I've done it before. Not $2 million, but it won't happen. If they say, if we launch a brand new website, will we double our traffic? I can say, well, I don't think we'll double our traffic, but I think in the next 3 weeks, we'll see impressions increase. There's a chance, and I don't put it on percentages. There's a chance that Google doesn't crawl the site, and this will happen. If we no index the entire site, how long will it take for Google to do this? Seen it before. So I can confidently say this is what I believe will happen. There are some other possibilities. If they push me to give an estimate, I can say based on my experience, 80% of the time it happened. So it's
Hmm.
less than an educated guess. It's less than a guess.
Okay, got it. Um, Tell us some things that the public doesn't know about you. Let's get to know the real you.
I already started with that about how I ended up doing all this awesome consulting totally by accident.
Well, I mean, um, let's see. I don't know. I'm really into Tai Chi. I can often be found in a specific coffee shop. I really like a certain brand of socks. I really like darn tough socks. Take us, l- l- give us a little more, give us a little more personal stuff.
So my favorite thing is that I love travel. So I love
I was
going
gonna
to new
get to that.
places.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me about Asia. Like you've been all over.
Yeah, so I'll tell you where the Asia thing came from. I went on vacation to Japan when I
Mm,
first joined SurveyMonkey. So I never really went on vacation anywhere because I didn't have vacation time. But I
mhm.
joined SurveyMonkey and they had unlimited vacation. And I'm like, wow. And nobody cared. They actually were allowed to take it. It was really a great company to work for. So I went to Japan on vacation and everything was different. And I was fascinated by it. So, like, for anybody that's ever been to Japan or seen anything Japanese, like a web page in Japan is very, very messy, and that's what they expect. Like, there's characters everywhere, and there's no white space. Whereas if you look at like an American website or a Western website, a lot of white space. Like Google, like if you look at Yahoo Japan and you see how messy it is, it makes you feel uncomfortable, and you don't want to stare at the page if you're used to white space. A Japanese person might look at Google with just like a search box with all that white space and just feel very uncomfortable. So going to Japan and seeing all that made me very curious about like different people and how they responded. And I would ask questions and look at what apps they use to do stuff. And that made me even more interested in like, hey, I don't want to just visit countries. I want to move to a country and experience that. And that's where that move to Singapore came from. So I was in Singapore for 2 years. And while I was there, spent tons of time traveling to different countries. And the thing I found most fascinating is really those nuances of like people and psychology and how they thought differently. I loved going to Indonesia. Indonesia is one of the poorest countries in the world, but also one of the happiest countries in the world. And
Mm,
the way they solve things. I went to China, and you really can't understand all these places until you go to it. So China has amazing startups, but they don't necessarily have amazing logistics. So a lot of the things they do in China, they do with people. So they don't have minimum wage. So like in China, they'll be like, oh, you order a product and it's at your house in 30 minutes. It's not because they have this amazing logistics system. It's because like there was a person with a bike just waiting and it printed out, in the warehouse, and they just grabbed it and they brought it to your house. And that's not something we can do in America because we don't really have bikes and we have minimum wage and all that stuff. Like being able to see this stuff up front, I always find to be fascinating. So that's where I'm always motivated with travel. I love going to Europe. I love like when I can mix it with business stuff. Like I get invited to a conference and then go to somewhere. I love going to Europe, but I find Europe to be a little bit more homogenous between all the different European countries
Mm.
versus going to Asia and seeing how different Indonesia is from Thailand or Vietnam.
I just looked at the clock. We've got officially 10 minutes left. I have more time. Do you have more time to chat, or
Yeah, yeah,
you
no,
have a hard stop? Okay.
I'm good.
Okay, cool. Um, I want to know what's your perspective on where we're at right now in terms of our industry? What are you watching closely?
So AI is a huge threat, and I think that some are not approaching the threat the right way. So their way they're approaching the threat is by pretending it's not a threat. So they're just saying business as usual. Some are approaching the threat as existential, and I think neither approach is correct. I think if you approach it from a user standpoint, which is SEO, I think will always exist because we're never going to live in a world dominated only by robots that tell us what to do. We always want to be in control. We have free will, and free will, we exercise that by requesting information. So we'll go on search engines and decide what we want and request ideas and information from it instead of like going to our AI and say, hey, it's time for you to eat lunch. This is where you should go eat lunch. So I think we're always going to be in a world where we make requests. SEO's job is to facilitate the companies we work for, whether full time or whether as consultants or whatever, or whether we own them, facilitate those products and companies and services in showing up in those requests at a high level. That might mean in ChatGPT, that might mean in Gemini, that might mean in regular Google search. So I think we're always going to be in a world where users are requesting information. The means for requesting that information, the mediums, maybe that will be in our self-driving cars. Maybe that will mean from our alarm clocks that have screens on them. Maybe that will mean that we continue to use mobile phones or glasses or whatever it is. There will always be that. So the role of SEO is to facilitate that. So that's where I think if SEO adapts and we can say it's not, again, it's about, and I think LLM optimization is the wrong approach because it's an answer. It will be some sort of answer. So maybe it's search results. It's interesting to see what AI overviews has become. It's basically become search results with a summary attached because it's pulling in the same search results. It changes the query. So I don't think we're in an existential crisis. I do think we're in a very strong pivot moment where SEO is changing faster than we can understand it. And it's also a good thing because for the first time in my SEO career, well, almost first time, we're watching platforms get fragmented. So when I first started doing SEO, there was a Yahoo, there was an MSN that became Bing. We're now back at that point where I think for the most part, people still use Google, but now you have to think about other things other than Google that actually are a little bit different. Like many times, like for now, you can do SEO and it sort of covers your Bing. I don't think I've logged into Bing Search Console in a long
It
time.
covers your Bing.
It
I
does. I
love
mean, for
that.
the most, or you don't really have Bing users, but I do think if you're thinking about LLMs, you do need to think about how you show up in Gemini, which will be different than ChatGPT, which will be different than Perplexity, which will be different than Claude, and different than Grok, and all the other ones that come out there, which means that SEO is actually more valuable and more complex. And that is the way I'd approach it.
Can you tell me a little bit about impact and what impact means to you? And I think your book ties into this a little bit, like, and in a number of ways, like the way I mean, you touched me when we were at Brighton SEO. I can't tell you how special it made me feel
Appreciate that.
when we talked for a couple of minutes. I was like, holy shit, I get to talk with Eli. And you signed your book for me, and you said some really nice things to me that made me feel like what I was doing mattered. So I'd love to dig into what impact means to you.
Yeah, I mean impact, so there's personal and career impact. Like I think it matters what people do and like who you talk to and how you help people. Like I love helping people on LinkedIn find new roles. I wish I was as successful as it looks like I am at helping people find new jobs. In the last 6 years of, well, it's mostly been since COVID, but 4 or 5 years since COVID of helping people get new roles, I've only helped handfuls of them actually get hired. But because like I try, so many people email me every single day, like, hey, I just got laid off. And it allows me more insight into the industry of what's happening. But I just got laid off and I feel sorry for every single one of them. And I try to connect them to people. I've hired people to try to help me manage it, and it's never been successful. I've tried technology to help me manage it. But unfortunately, what I do is mostly LIFO, last in, first out. So if someone emails me, they're like, hey, I just got laid off. And then someone else emails me, I'm looking for a new director of SEO. That's who I connect. I don't really have any good way of deep diving into who emailed me a month ago. But I think that's important. I want to see people get better jobs, and that's on a personal basis. On a career basis, I think that SEO matters, and I think it matters as an acquisition channel. And I don't like to work with companies where they don't actually reach that potential. Like SEO can matter. If built properly, it should matter more than just rankings. And that's where I what I want to do is work and have impact on it. And I only end up signing clients where they're willing to do that. All of my SOWs have a paragraph about accountability and that they
Mhm.
need to assign someone that will have internal ownership. Feel like, when engagements end badly, they didn't read that accountability part because like they'll get onboarded and I'll say, well, who do I talk to? And they're like, we're deciding. Like that should have been decided. That was that paragraph in the SOW. But if you don't have someone assigned to shepherd SEO internally, it's not going to happen.
Mm. Visibility, not rankings. Preach.
Yes. I just using the word rankings really distills it into the down to the wrong place. And I think that's the issue.
Mm. Okay. We've got some questions in chat here that I want to make sure we get through because let's start with the last in, first out. Is it really necessary to wait for LLMs to display our links, or should we be more concerned about mentions?
Mentions in LLMs. Interesting. I think if you think about the goal of SEO, it answers the question itself. So if you're selling e-commerce and you need someone to show up on your website and click that product, you need the link. You need the sale. If you are a service or an informational product, the mention is good enough because it builds out that brand awareness. And I think that's where SEO is changing. And I've written about this in my newsletter about mid-funnel SEO. So top of funnel is all the way at the top. Like, I talked earlier about back pain. Bottom of funnel is like, how do I, specific procedure for solving my back pain. Mid funnel might be like, back pain from anxiety. Like I've been educated that my back pain comes from anxiety. And now you can say these are the different ways to solve it. I haven't already been educated on that. Mid funnel, I think, is where SEO should be, but it depends on what you're doing as far as like product or services. So if you like SEO might become a brand awareness channel where I Google and I find out these are the best services in my industry. And then you go find them however you find them. Like maybe you find it on Google Maps or maybe you do deeper searches. And bottom of funnel e-commerce, like you need someone to come to your website and buy that product. And again, there's no catch-all answer. It really will always depend on the different products or services.
I got a two-parter for you. Who have been your mentors, and who are you jealous of?
Yeah. So one of my biggest mentors in SEO, he passed away. His name is Aaron Shear. So yeah,
Oh,
everyone should Google him. Did you know him?
no,
So
no.
Aaron Shear, old SEO. I think he passed away from diabetes.
Hmm.
He was a consultant at that startup I worked for. And when I was being interviewed, so he interviewed me and then he stayed on as a consultant after I got hired. And one of the things that always impressed me, and I learned this from him about the confidence on SEO answers, the founders would ask him questions and say, hey, if we launch this website, what happens? And he would not ever say it depends. He would just give a straight answer like, oh yeah, we're going to quadruple our traffic. And then the next week nothing happened. And they'd be like, what happened to your quadruple traffic? He's like, well, I can't be entirely correct ever because I don't control Google. But all the other times I've done this, it quadruple traffic. And like that confidence, like he consulted for amazing companies like eBay and Zappos. I was like, wow, that's the way I want to be an SEO consultant. Just like really understand this. And he taught me so much around SEO and like helped me get some of my first speaking gigs and showed me how to be successful in that role. So like he was a big mentor. And then who am I jealous of in SEO? I mean, I'm jealous of the people that take their SEO knowledge and build it into companies and build it into products and services. And we have so many people like that. I don't think I have the capability of doing that. I can barely build an agency. I don't want to build an agency. I like being on my own. So
Seems
I wish
like
I
you're
could do that,
doing
but
pretty
I
okay.
gotta do what I do.
I love that. Do you love speaking? How does it make you feel before, during, after?
The first times I spoke, I was so scared, and then I got on the stage and I was like, oh, this is great. Um, Sometimes I like it. It depends on the topic. It's much easier to speak when you know the audience will respond. There's actually something that happened to me in Asia. So in certain countries in Asia, they show less emotion, and it was very hard to speak because I saw no emotion. So I would tell a joke and it was emotionless. And then I felt like I was doing a really bad job or my joke didn't work. And then I figured out that and I watched other people who were genuinely funny and like they got emotion. They didn't get emotion either. So I was like, oh, it's not me. So what I started doing is I started putting a lot of words on slides and making them very small. And then people would stand up and take pictures. And then I was like, oh, that is how I get a response. Like I would do these polls, like raise your hand if like you ate breakfast today. No hands. Raise your hand if you didn't eat breakfast. No hands. I'm like, oh, okay, it's not me. But then when I started doing these things, like here's a QR code, and I'd make it really, really small, and everyone would stand up and crowd the stage to take pictures. And like, oh, they are paying attention. So it's hard to speak when people don't respond. So I love speaking when it's like an engaging audience, tougher when it's not.
That's super funny. I found that I mean, my career highlights probably in terms of speaking were speaking at MozCon. Like in when I spoke there in 2023, I did this deck called Down the Mountain, and in the moment, it felt like I crushed it. I told some jokes, audience was laughing, it felt raucous from the stage, and I'd spoken in London the year before. I don't get to travel like you get to travel, but like I spoke at Search Love in London, and I, I I said something that I knew was funny, and I was like, "Man, they are so quiet. Like it's just not the same as the United States." And I'm going to Japan in October, and I'm a
That's awesome.
little afraid because it's like I think it's gonna have that same vibe of being a very quiet room. So
Try that with the slides, like make something really small and you'll get that response.
I love it.
Yeah,
Um,
I spoke at a conference in Brazil in November and no one spoke English. They had translators, they had headsets. So I would tell a joke and then I would pause and then wait till it got translated and then everyone laugh.
that's hysterical.
Yeah.
Okay, I feel like I'm running out of questions. But that's awesome. I feel like we covered so much ground. Um, I want to know, we talked about this at the time, but tell us about what the book has done for your career. Is it the content of the book? Is it having the book? Do you remember that conversation we had?
Yeah. So there are probably three things the book has done. One is it allowed me to create a concept of product led SEO, which gives me something like, and the reason I wrote it was because I wanted to create this concept product led SEO. I just didn't know so many people would read it. So I wanted to create this concept. I want people to think about SEO differently. So it gives me that asset to point to and be like, hey, this is a thing. You hear all these agencies and consultants, this is my thing. So that's one. The second thing it does is it allows me to have a business card. So I can meet companies and I can say, hey, here's a thing. This is me being different. And the third is it gives a ton of background on how I would approach a challenge. So a lot of times when I'm pitching against agencies, they're all saying the exact same thing. And then companies will say, why are you any different? I'm like, well, this is the way I'd approach it. I'm not making this up as a sales pitch. This is the thing I wrote 5 years ago or 4 years ago, and it is still the same today. So that's what the book did. And it has become a great lead gen tool, but I didn't expect it to be. I didn't expect to like, sell that many copies. I was very lucky that I had really good friends on social media that when I launched the book, they all like shared and promoted it, and it became the thing of like, oh, I also have to check out the book, and then that
Mm.
created its own snowball effect. But I didn't expect that to happen. I thought I would sell $100.
Well, I got to say, I've loved spending so much time with you today, and I'm just super grateful that we get to do this. any parting thoughts you want to share with our audience?
Yeah, I think that many people in our industry feel like now is a tough time. And I agree. I see a lot of emails, and I woke up this morning to a bunch more of people getting laid off or losing their consulting clients. And I think it's a tough time. But I also think that many of the companies laying off their SEO teams, firing their SEO agencies and consultants are making a huge mistake. They're doing the wrong thing. They're not investing in a channel that will mean so much more. And the monopoly powers of Meta and Google and other ad platforms will mean that those channels will get more expensive. And this is a channel that creative companies, creative people can really dominate. So I think there's a huge light at the end of the tunnel. I'm personally raising prices. Ooh, sorry. I'm personally raising prices on prospective consulting clients because I want companies to really invest in this channel. And it is absolutely a tough time, but I think things will improve very soon.
Mm, awesome. Eli, I thank you so much for today, and I'm hopeful that we can stay in much closer contact through the coming months because I just feel like you're a brother from another mother when I hear
Oh
you
man, I
talk.
love this. No, it's so great to talk to you and get to know you here.
Yeah, cool. All right. So, everybody, thanks so much for an amazing campfire chat. Our next campfire chat is going to be with Joe Hall 2 weeks from today. And I'm super stoked to get to hang out with Joe. He's super funny, super smart. I've loved
Yeah,
sharing the stage with him at MozCon. And I think our audience is going to get a real kick out of that. Um, Eli, you're amazing. Thanks so much.
thanks so much.
Everybody, see you in 2 weeks. Peace. Okay, stay with us for a minute.
So
Riverside takes